All right, Donna said, you don't know what to expect. Excuse me. However, I would say there are some people who do very well know what to expect, because our son Wendell and his two children, Cora and Quinn, are here today. And I heard Wendell talking to his mom in the other room. They did not know I was there, but I heard. And Wendell asked his mom, do you think Dad is going to embarrass you today? Now, I want all of you to listen very closely to this, because some of you have talked to me about when I am in this position up here, that sometimes I am rather rough on my wife, Barbara. This is Barbara's reply. No, he won't embarrass me, but I don't know what he's going to say. So, there it is, right from her mouth. But you might want to be ready, Barbara. So, Moses and the burning bush. And I am just going to try to show you how this might have happened. I'm going to show you two different ways how it could have happened. This is the bush, and you can see it is burning. A portion of it is the burning bush. So Moses is out tending the flock, and he walks up here. I'm going to show you two ways. This is the first way. He comes up here. Oh, another bush caught by fire. Probably lightning last night. Nothing's going to happen. It's going to be all right. That's one way. And he goes on because he's tending his flock and he has to get on with that. However, the way the person tells this story is different. This is what Donna read. Moses is tending his flock and he comes up here. Ooh, look, that bush is on fire. I'm going to turn and go up here. Look at it. And then he listens, and he hears a voice. Moses, Moses. And he says, here am I. And as somebody has said, the rest is history. So, a few months ago, Dave preached a sermon, and he talked about this. And he had heard the story from somebody down in Harrisonburg at Pastor's Week. And I really liked it. It kind of hit me. And it's a new way of looking at Moses and the burning bush. And I find it exciting to see new ways of looking at things. So, later on, I also realized that an author that I really enjoyed wrote about this same thing, and maybe that's where the other person got it from. But the important thing is that Moses stopped, and he looked, and he listened. And Moses could have very well done what I did in the first time that I showed that. He could have kept walking along, but he didn't. He stopped. And so I think in our spiritual journey, it's important that we stop and that we are willing to take a closer look at some things. And so what I'd like to explore with you is how we find God, how we find the sacred, the holy, the divine, whatever we call it, outside the walls of the church, which is where we spend most of our time. And we will look at different examples. And then at the end, and I keep kicking this, really we should, at the end, I am going to just talk for 15 minutes, and limit my talking to 15 minutes. Then I would like you to share how you experience God outside these walls. Because it seems to me it's really important that when we hear somebody talk, and sometimes I go to a seminar or a workshop, and I keep thinking, okay, stop talking. I've got some questions. And that's how we learn. So I want to hear your experiences. So I'm going to talk about two ways of seeing God outside in the natural world. One is the land, the earth, the living things, the animals, the plants. And then the second one will be how we see God in our human relationships, the human world. Now, I'm just talking, I said, for 15 minutes, and then it's your turn. I have yet to determine when that 15 minutes starts, because there's a lot of introductory things, and just sitting in the pews, I thought of some extra things to add, so that is non-countable time. So if you're looking at your watch, don't hold me to that too closely. When I was in 4th grade, my 4th grade teacher told my mother, you know, Jerry looks out the window a lot. I don't think he likes being in school. Well, yes, I didn't like being in school too much. It wasn't until I went to college that I started to like my education. And that's probably why I can get excited about thinking about God outside, because I like to be outside. Think about some of the biblical accounts of people who encountered God, the Holy, God's Spirit. We just heard about Moses from what Donna read. That was outside. If you think about Jacob, when he was laying on the ground outside at night, he encountered God outside. If you look at Jesus, almost all his ministry that we hear about was outside. Paul, his conversion was on the road with his feet on the ground. In fact, if you think about it, there aren't too many stories in the Bible. And I would say, somebody might challenge me on this, but I would say there are none in the Old Testament that took place inside a synagogue or a church. None. So, the people of the Bible experienced God outdoors. For me, I find biking to be an experience where I can experience the holy. When I go on a bike ride, I will think about God, and in relationship to books I've read, people I've talked with, and I usually go for at least an hour. So I have a lot of time to do this. And for me, that's communion with God, that's prayer. It's not necessarily a traditional form of prayer, but for me, I'm communing with God, and that's prayer for me. I also see a lot of wildlife. The bike path, this past year that we've had the bike path, I've seen deer, and I've seen lions, and I've seen tigers. The lions and the tigers, they weren't on the bike path, but I've seen them in a zoo. So, no, but you see all kinds of God's creation. You also see the seasons coming and going. In a few months, you will see corn starting to pop up through the ground. Then you will see later the corn turning brown, and you will see the seasons progressing. For me, that's a spiritual experience. It's part of the majesty of God's creation. Barb and I were once camping in Duluth, Minnesota, above Duluth, and I was going to go on a bike path early in the morning, and Barb asked, do you want to take the camera? I said, no, I don't want to take the camera. It's kind of extra stuff, don't want to take that. Well, as I went on the bike path, beautiful bike path, I saw a bear and its two cubs. And when I got back, I told Barb, why didn't you tell me to take the camera? But anyway, it was a majestic thing, coming down through the cut in the mountain and looking at the city of Duluth with the sun coming up. and shining over Lake Superior. To me, that's an encounter with the sacred. Diana Butler Bass writes an excellent book, just come out. It's called Grounded. And so in that book, she's talking about this very same subject, finding God in the world. She spends a lot of time talking about dirt, if you want to call it soil, and what we are doing to the dirt, and how we are ruining God's creation. For me, that has a lot of meaning because I experienced God in the greenhouse as I work with dirt. Sometimes teachers will ask me, what are you going to do with the kids today? And I'll say, well, we're going to transplant. Oh yeah, you're going to just play in the dirt. I think that can be a spiritual experience. So I also find it to be therapy or healing. And a meaning of salvation in the Bible is healing. And so I can find that to be very healing, to work in the dirt. There's a movie. The name of the movie is A River Runs Through It. And it's a story about a man and his relationship with his two sons. And he spends a lot of time out on the river with fly fishing, trout stream. And he's out there one day on the banks of the river and he says, look at those rocks. The water runs over those rocks. The Word of God is beneath those rocks. Think about biblical healing experiences and how many of them took place in water. We have songs that we sing that talk about the healing waters. Many biblical healings related to water. I'd like to just read a section from Barbara Brown Taylor's book, An Altar in the World, and here she is talking about the same thing that I'm telling you about. An altar, God in the world. As you leave here, look for God. She says, the easiest practice of reverence I know is simply to sit down somewhere outside, preferably near a body of water, and pay attention for at least 20 minutes. It is not necessary to take on the whole world at first. Just take the 3 square feet of earth on which you are sitting, paying close attention to everything that lives within that small estate. You might even decide not to kill anything for 20 minutes, including the salt marsh mosquito that lands on your arm. Just blow her away and ask her to please go find someone else to eat. So that's how she would describe finding God. But you have to stop and look, and you have to listen for that to happen. Now I'd like for us to look at how God dwells in the world in human relationships. And we all experience many different human relations every day. And Jesus talked about the importance of loving our neighbor. In fact, he said all of the commandments can be summed up in loving God and loving your neighbor. That's what it's all about. And many authors of religion that have studied the religions of the world would say that compassion, love, is at the heart of almost every religion, if not all the religions. Compassion and love. So as we think about relationships, think about that verse. God is love. And so if we are in a loving relationship, we are experiencing God. Barbara Brown Taylor, in the book An Altar in the World that I talked about, talks about paying attention to people. The people you meet, pay attention to them. She talked about going up to the grocery store and paying attention to the cashier. She said she would look at the cashier, look at their eyes. What are they feeling? Are they happy? Are they sad? And so forth. She said, pay attention to the people that you meet. You can encounter God there. Sometime after that, Barbara and I were shopping at the grocery store, and I do a lot of shopping for school. I'm always buying stuff. I get kind of tired of it. It was fairly late at night, and there weren't many people in line, so as we go through the line, Barbara looks at the cashier and she says, you know, you look kind of tired. Are you feeling tired? And the cashier says, oh, yes, and I'm thinking, oh, no, here we go. We're going to have to sit through. And then I thought, her words came back to me. The Word of God. And it was coming through Barbara. Some of us are slow learners, but I'm trying to learn that. And hugs with other human beings are a form of experiencing God. The hug. And I wasn't thinking about saying this, but it just came to me, so this is time off the clock. But our daughter-in-law told Barbara and I that we give side hugs. In other words, just kind of come up from the side like this. Her family gives full body hugs where, you sometimes lose your breath. And anyway, so we've been taught to do that kind of a hug. But hugs, that physical encounter with somebody else, can be a spiritual moment. Doesn't mean it always is. I'll just relate two. One was a student at school, and I work with kids now. I used to work with kids playing. Now I work with kids working. I've matured. So we do work, and kids get paid for the work. And it's not your tax money. We totally earn everything through the things that we do in the greenhouse and washing wax and so forth. You're not paying taxes for it, except my salary you are. But so 2 times a year the students get a check. And this probably happened 20 years ago, but as I gave the checks out, there was a girl that was probably 16 years old. And she was not overly expressive. She was kind of shy. But when I gave her check, she said, Jerry, can I give you a hug? I have never gotten a check before. And that was a spiritual experience. And then the other time was at my mother's memorial service. And I think one of the things that I will say is that emotions are also a spiritual experience. So just remember that. Some of us may have an encounter with the divine through our emotions. So, at my mother's worship, memorial service, our son Wendell gave the eulogy, and he did a great job with it. And out in the parking lot afterwards, we came together, and I said, hey, thank you, you did a great job. And we spontaneously hugged. So, this is a demonstration of how emotions are a sacred experience. And I do this so that you will not be embarrassed when you want to show emotions. And I think I did a fair job of that. Another spiritual experience with the sacred was at the convention in Kansas City this past summer. I had a great experience there. And the last day of worship, we were singing a song, and we had gone there with our son Mark and his wife Dee Dee and their 3 children, and we were singing this song, and the words of the song were, some of the words, how can we say that we love God if we don't love our brother and our sister? And I thought, That's a neat song. How can we say we love God if we don't love our brother and our sister? And I took out, I had a package of gummy bears, and I took them out, and I handed one to our 4-year-old granddaughter, Taylor. And she immediately turned and handed it to her brother. Now, if you want to be cynical, you could say, well, she was waiting for a bigger one, or a better color, or whatever. But to me, that was a holy moment, singing that song and seeing her give it to her brother. She, I suppose, knew she was going to get one too. But maybe the song was having an effect on her, who knows. And then later on, in the parking lot, as we were preparing to leave, Mark and Dee Dee and their family going to Heston, Barbara and I heading back to Ohio, we were talking at the car, the kids were in the car, and I related that experience to Dee Dee because she and I had been talking throughout the convention about the holy, the sacred, the divine, how we experience this. And she was asking me about that. So I told her that experience. And I started crying. And her oldest child, Kaysen, said, "Why is Grandpa crying?" And she said, "Well, I'll explain it to you on the way home." So I never got to hear why I was crying. And I really don't like people explaining me to, well, no, that. So, another way of experiencing God is through laughing. And I believe that can be a sacred experience. Many of you are familiar with Ted Swartz, the playwright, and he writes a book, Laughter is a Sacred Experience. And so he shares that. And I think that's part of the sacred, experiencing the sacred as we laugh. And so I'll just relate one story that I think is maybe is an example of this. There was a peace conference, and John Deere tells about this. John Deere is a peace activist who has gone to jail almost 100 times for his tireless work for peace. And there was a peace conference, and John Deere was with about 25 people in the back room, and the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu were going to speak. And so they were just in a back room before they were coming out to talk to about 25,000 people. So Desmond Tutu comes in, and he sees the Dalai Lama, and he goes up to him and he says, "I am going to kill you. I hate you. Everybody hates you. I might as well be the one to kill you. Somebody's going to do it sometime." And then the two of them just hugged each other and rolled on the ground laughing. A sacred experience. And then, as they were rolling on the ground, somebody said, "Hey, it's time for you two to go out there and talk." They got up and they went out and they talked to people about peace and nonviolence. Laughing is part of the sacred also. So, that is my time. The rest of the time is yours. Daniel, do you have the handheld mic? Thank you. So, can we use both of these at the same time, Lee?
Try.
Sure we can. Okay. So, what are your experiences that you would like to share with the sacred and the story? And I think we'll just go start at the front row and just go, well, or maybe we'll just let you spontaneously decide. Who wants to share something? How have you experienced God? Kim?
I can't remember who it was, but I know it was in a book. And a missionary was in a third world country trying to explain to a person what his job was. And he told the gentleman that he was a preacher, and his job was to teach people about God. And the person said to him, "Well, you must have a very easy job. Who cannot look at a sunrise? Who cannot look at a sunset or see the mountains and the trees and not know there's a God?"
Good, thank you, Kim. Yes.
Not many of my big mountain ski buddies are still left alive, but they always knew why I was the last one to leave the top of the mountain, because I stood there and talked about God and the breath that was out before.
Thank you.
I've had a little, excuse me, a little more time to think about this. But I will recite 3 different situations.
I'm limiting. I'm sorry, that was terrible. Talk as long as you want. I mean, I didn't say how long we would deal with this. The only thing I was told by Bill was we needed to be out in time for the Super Bowl. That is 6:30, and I'll try to get you out by 5:30, so go ahead.
I need to be out before that, Mary, single board.
We'll work at that, Cindy.
Okay, well, I think we can make it by 4. 3 different situations. Number 1, when I look at an iris, I look at the face of an iris. I look at the symmetrical design of the iris. I look at the colors as they fuse. One color fuses with another. That's a spiritual moment for me, looking at the face of an iris. And number 2 situation, I enjoy sitting on the front porch and I read there, but I wait for the little helicopters to occur. And they will often come right towards my face and look at me, and then they'll go up and eat out of the feeder. Now, that's a spiritual moment for me. And number 3 was the time last week of relating to Dave. We talked about Sarah's loss and the grief that he was feeling, and that was a spiritual moment as we related to each other.
You mentioned hugs as being expressions of love. Recently, I've had a lot of hugs, and I felt God's love.
Good.
Mary?
I have a west window in my apartment, and I love sitting there in the evenings. And this week, there was one night when the clouds were broken apart, the sun was coming through, and there were outlines of the clouds. It was beautiful. That was a moment. I thought then, maybe God will come, Jesus will come back during that time, because it was so beautiful.
Thank you.
This is Cheryl. I have 2 different times that came to mind. I enjoy sitting outside on our back deck in the spring or in the fall and listening to wind chimes. And I have many wind chimes, and I like the different sounds that they make and how gentle it all seems, and I feel close to God. Second, I enjoy listening to other languages. And I like it whether it's French or whether it's any language. I think it's amazing that how one communicates in ways, and you don't have to understand it. And then I think how, God can hear everything and He knows everything. And I like just sitting there and thanking God that communication takes place whether we understand it or not.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I can relate to that because I had 1 year of French. I think I failed it.
I'm up here and, can you turn?
Anybody else?
I'm up here in the balcony. This is
Okay.
Lisa. Tagging on to Cheryl's experience, I had the opportunity to go to Brazil for about 3 months. I actually took my first winter quarter of college off and visited with the family of the girl who was an exchange student at our house when I was a junior in high school. And one of the first weeks there, I was there from a few weeks before Christmas until the beginning of March. And so one of the first weeks there, it was time, they were Catholic, and it was time to go to midnight mass on Christmas Eve. And I wasn't too sure, number one, that it was a Catholic service. I wasn't sure what to expect. I had never been to one. Well, actually, I'd been to one with her here, but that was the only one that I had ever been to. And I knew that the entire service was going to be in Portuguese. And even though I had had Spanish, there was still quite a bit of a disconnect there. I can't explain why, but I understood everything that happened in that service and everything that was said in that service.
Thank you. I am sure glad for the other people who are going. Nellie?
I listen to classical music a lot, and sometimes the music just overwhelms me. It's just gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would just say, this was something that I was thinking about saying, and then I scratched out because it was going to take too long, but this isn't part of my time. So one of the things I enjoy with the greenhouse is going up to the greenhouse, and I sit and I face the east early in the morning on Sunday morning, and it's not work if any of you are concerned on breaking the Sabbath because it's healing. So I face the east and I watch the sun come up, and I turn NPR on. I don't know if they still do it because it's been almost a year since I've worked in the greenhouse, but they used to have gospel music, and I listen to, I enjoy that. And yeah, so music is certainly a way we experience the sacred.
I feel God when I look back on my life and realize all the things that have come together that aren't just, that couldn't be happenstance, and realize that God's walking with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I usually wouldn't probably pick up the mic, but I wanted to add one thing onto the story this morning from with my mother and I. It wasn't that I was just asking about whether there would be anything embarrassing. The other part of it was I asked whether there would be any tears.
I didn't hear that.
You didn't hear that. But, you know, it's been 20 years since I've lived here. But when I think of a place that is sort of special to me, there's a place along the Mad River where there's a sycamore tree, and I can envision that, and there's a place that, you know, usually I go down there fishing by the end of the day, and I hadn't caught any fish. That would be just a place that I would sit and be quiet, and that's still a very special place for me. And I think that a lot of times nature helps us to find a kind of find your center and be open then to listening and learning. So.
Thank you. And I experienced the holy moment watching Quinn and Cora wade in the Mad River and thinking about how their father and their uncle used to enjoy the Mad River. You just want to check and make sure we need people like that too. It's part of using the gifts of the church. Anyone else?
I found it a spiritual experience hearing all of the other spiritual experiences, stuff I had never thought about, and two others. When I go out at night and I look up at the stars and the universe, it's overwhelming to see. Some of them are, they say, are a million light years away. And the other thing is, when in the spring, when seeds first come through the ground, is a spiritual experience.
Thank you. I think what you said is important. As we listen to each other, sometimes when I hear your story, I say, oh, I've never thought of that. Yeah, that could be a part of my experience. That's why we need to talk to each other.
When Carl and I were in Israel, I had a really neat spiritual experience when we were at the Garden Tomb with Jesus. And just being there and kind of the quietness and the beauty of that with a group of people, that as we entered the tomb and then as we came out, they started singing, every knee shall bow, every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. And that just really hit me because I thought, oh, how wonderful. There will be a time when even those that don't believe will bow down and say the name of Jesus.
Yeah, thank you. It's true. And sometimes a physical place, a building, can bring us that experience, or a tomb. Anyone else?
This is going to be something very simple, let all the deep thinking that you're going on.
There had it? No.
But, okay, on a 0 morning, and the lane needs to be cleaned out, it snowed. And diesel engines do not like to start when it's cold. And so I go out there and put the key in this ignition and say, okay, Jesus, are we going to go? And it starts. And I said, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. It is, yes, he helps, I'm sure.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm looking at your grandma and your dad, and nobody is saying no, so. One of the things you want to remember is that as you become a grandparent, never go against what your children say. They know best. So if they say, we don't want our children to have any gum, you would not say something like, well, I'm the grandmother, I get to do whatever I want. I don't know why I said that. That wasn't appropriate. So, anyone else? All right, so I want to thank you for each of you sharing your experiences, because like I said, that's how we learn. And I would say that everybody who shared, except for 3 people, your experiences were correct. Now, the ones who did not have correct experiences, now that, hopefully I can make a point with that. Your story is your story, and your story is true. Actually, I was talking with Wendell a little bit this morning about a book that I had read and sharing somebody's experience, and it was very meaningful to me. And Wendell kind of said, well, no, that's not meaningful to me. Now he'll probably come and tell me, well, that's not what I meant. But anyway, our experiences are our experiences. This is what we experience, it's our story, and it's right, as long as we remember God is love, and we're not hurting anybody through our experiences. Thank you.
WBTL, we believe in love.